I have here made a new asset and I have imported this 3UDIM asset, but I also have here the Snail upres asset that is available also download for free here on my Gumroad. So for example here, I want to transfer these masks here into my 10UDIM because I'm not gonna redo that one in this demo here. So what we can do here is to take my channel. I made a separate tutorial about how to do this more in depth, but I'm just gonna do it here on one of these here. So I'm gonna go transfer. I'm gonna from my object Snail 3UDIM, I'm gonna take my into 10UDIM asset here. I'm just gonna take this channel here and I'm just gonna take a look here. I have radial, inverse, distance weighted, and world units. So I'm just gonna hit OK here and transfer this texture from my 3UDIM asset into my 10UDIM asset and use this one as basis for my material regions in a similar way that I did for the layer stack. Looking here in my UV view, I now have this mask transferred over to my 10UDIM. So essentially here what I've done is I have this third object here where I have essentially gone through and transfer all of the important mask here coming from previous sessions. So I can essentially start to plug my material workflow in here pretty quick into my uprest asset here. So here's some of the major masks that I'm gonna reuse here in my material workflow here going forward. Okay, I'm back in my layer graph scene. I'm just gonna hijack a few of these materials here just for convenience sake. So I want to have this steel and my rust material. Looking here at the node graph, when we build it, auto build it, it's quite chaotic. And this is something that is much easier to maintain when we build it ourselves. Essentially here, looking here, very basically here, if I go into my layer stack, we can see here these names here, steel, rust. This is the bottom of the layer stack and this is the top of the layer stack. So I just want to export these two materials, and then I also want to export some of these materials for my painted materials and some of these grade nodes here as well, because I've essentially graded some of these materials to become the final color of the asset. So I'm gonna do that now and then bring these nodes into my other scene and start to hook this up. So what we can do is to select these nodes here that I wanna export out and reuse, and I'm gonna right click here and say file package nodes. And this is something I'm just gonna save here to my location. And I'm also gonna export this HSV nodes here. So I'm just gonna take this base material and this HSV node and export this one out as well. Let's import these things that I exported from my layer stack. So I have made here a shelf with my snail stuff. So I'm just gonna take one of these node packages here. So I essentially have here material and then HSV node that I'm gonna use. A material in Mari의 is a node graph within a group. So if I look at this one here and just take a look at what we get, we have exposed parameters here. For example, we can say repeat, rotation, we can start to grade, saturation, etc. So this is essentially something you can build yourself. So I have extended upon one of the materials that is shipped here in the shelf. So I extended this one, the metal green here, and just added some additional stuff that I'm using here. So looking inside this material, we can see here, it's very basic here. We have tallable nodes that is driven by links. They are linked together essentially. And then we have some operations on top like HSV and other things that's been exposed here. So what I'm gonna do is recreate the regions that I did before. So for example here, this is the turquoise part. Let's drag another one in so we can see here. Let's take the red for example, and I just have my red material set up, and this red material essentially had two different materials, one that is 2D and one that is 3D. I'm doing that to take away, for example, edges where I have UV seams. In the bottom here now, I'm just gonna now do a quick blend between these two. So let's take this one and I'm just gonna hit the M and create a multi-shell merge. So essentially blending all of these nodes at the same time into a blend node. And then blend node is essentially a layer. So I'm just gonna add this one on top. And now we're essentially gonna have two materials on top of each other like so. And now I want to grade this one so it actually becomes red. So in the layer stack example, I had some operations on top of my material that was actually grading the diffuse color. So I can do the same here if I want to. I'm just gonna insert another merge node here onto my material and take my cloud. So I'm gonna borrow the diffuse stream coming from my material. So the base color. So this one is essentially a cloud with a color on top. I'm gonna merge this one. So I'm gonna have a merge node as well. I'm gonna merge this one on top here. So I'm essentially doing this instead. Now I'm gonna take my blending mode to become component color. Maybe I want to further do an HSV operation because I had some HSV, I graded it additionally. So I can do the same here, but it's easier to maintain it now in the node graph than when it's auto-built like it did in the layer stack. So I'm just gonna pipe this one back to the base color like so. So now we have essentially done an override from the material. I've done some manual overrides for just the diffuse stream, and I can now essentially package this using a backdrop. So this one becomes like my red material. And then I need to decide where will this red material be applied. So I could essentially have individual HSV nodes for the entire material, like if I would do it here. But the problem with that is I'm gonna get the same kind of repeat. So I want to randomize the material or the projections for the different regions. So that's why I'm choosing to use a few materials with different projections and orientations, so we don't get this evident pattern that we can see here. If I zoom out, we can kind of start to see the same repeating pattern. So that's why I'm applying it like this. So now I essentially want to create a mask here. So I'm just gonna insert paint node and apply this one into my mask. And I'm gonna look here through this multi-channel merge now. And now we can see I don't have any red material, but we want to apply it onto this region here. And I'm just going to drag this one into this region. So you see here now we have essentially applied the red material here. What I've done here is I've done similar. So I had turquoise, red, I had a slightly greenish, and then this one was orange, and this one was yellow. So now I'm gonna jump over to another object where I have this set up and working, so we can dissect how this is actually set up when I replicated the same thing that I have in the layer stack, but in a controlled fashion. So I'm just gonna take another object here. So what I've done here is to, if we look at this, so I kind of used the mask that I converted earlier. So I have those imported here. Also have broadcast nodes here for my different masks. So a broadcaster is essentially a way to declare a variable that I then can pick up whatever I want to. So I can just say teleport receiver. At this case here is just gonna take the last defined one. But I can go in here and this drop down here, I can get a list here of already the defined mask, so I can switch here depending on. So I'm setting up my mask over here, and then if I dissect this one, I'm applying here this is kind of the step I did, but this is more refined. So in this stage here, I have my initial assignments. So this is just the zoning. You can see here, now I apply the red. The next step here, this is the green material. And I also here did some additional patching for UV seams in the bottom. I have a cloud and an HSV operation. And that one is fed back into like a complete material. I have here the next zone. And my strategy for this is just to define the materials and the zoning for them. The breakup is something I apply later on. So you can see here, the next one here is the orange one. And we can also kind of mimic the backdrops so it's clear what material is what here. And then lastly, we have the yellow. And this node here is a multi-channel breakpoint. So this is the good part about material workflow. You can see here, I have quite a lot of materials and nodes here contributing. And eventually it will start to become slow. But I'm treating this as the paint block. So this is the painted coating on top. So I'm freezing all of these blends and operations into a multi-channel bake point. So looking at this one, then I'm using here in my base here, essentially I have my metal and rust material. So if I would go in here and say here, teleport receiver, and I want to pick up the mask metal here. So we can see here. So you see here, I have this mask where I dictated that this is where I want metallic properties. I'm just going to slide this one into the mask stack there. And now take a look. And now I should have bare metal where those ones are, like so. If I want to paint something on top, I could just go in here and say paint. I want to have my transparent, and I'm going to have this over. I can additionally do additional work here. For example, let's say that we want to have some scuff here. And there we go. Now I'm blending this material properties here, or this painted on top of my metal and rust. And then I'm using this mask that I constructed. So I essentially have all of my region masks that I used from the layer stack, but I'm essentially adding those together so it becomes a single mask looking like this. This is what I use to apply my paint on top of my metal now. It's a single mask, and I also have a bake point here just to optimize this one even further. And the result is then looking through this material blend here. This is what I get, where I now have metal in the bottom and the paint on top. And we can see here, if I would like to have more or less of this underlying metal here or rust, I can go into my mask and paint black or white there. Now I have here a separate dirt material. Looking here, what we get here is my dirt. I can go in here and do some overrides. I'm gonna take this paint here. So I need to define a receiver. I haven't done that. So teleport, broadcast, dust, dirt is the variable that we're gonna search for. So now I'm picking this one up, and I'm gonna add this one on top of my diffuse here using a merge. And there we go. We can tweak it here slightly, like so. And now looking here through my shader, we can see here, this is what I get. And now we will have the dirt on top here once it's, yeah, there we can see. So we can see here, we kind of have dirt. It's not as evident because I've tweaked it here. So I have these two masks here, this mask and this mask that is coming also from my layer stack that I just transferred over. And then I have a fade here. So essentially my fade here is dictating how much of this we're going to see here. So if I start to work here with my constant here, I'm multiplying this one on top here. So the more I'm essentially adding this value here, the more I will see from it. So if I go back to my shader, we can see how this will work when we actually start to integrate this. You can see here, if I do this, if I take it towards 1, we're going to get more from this mask. And towards 0 of this dirt here. So I'm just adding now like a dust layer on top here, like so. And I could obviously go in here and additionally paint on top if I want to have more or less of this dust. So this is kind of how I approach it using the node graph. Instead of having everything one after the other, I like to compartmentalize. So I'm essentially here starting with my rust and metal in the bottom and constructing a paint layer on top, and then I bake it down once I'm happy with the assignments, just to get faster turnaround. And also you can bring more complexity. So for example, if I would need to have additional materials, it's easy for me just to add that and then rebake this bake point, and everything will be up to date. The same thing here goes to my mask where I combined. If I need to do additional overrides, I can do it here after the bake point or before the bake point, depending on if I want this live or optimized. Additionally, for example, if you would need to have like a wetness layer, you could start to insert another multi-channel bake point here after here, and additionally construct, additional materials on top. Or maybe you need to have like an oil pass or something that has a slightly different surface property. You could do that as well. So it's more free to design the workflow than if you let the layer stack build your material workflow. And it's also more human readable what's going on here compared to when you just use the layer stack. So in the next one, we're just gonna take a quick look at the asset with the rocket engines. I just want to take a look here now what's coming next in these tutorials here. So for example here, you can already download this asset here now with this extended UV set. So I'm just going to take a look here what we have. So we have 38, I believe, UDIMs. And also we have additional G here with the rocket engines. What I did here was to actually add in the bottom here to have two different metals here. So we have this one that is kind of a shiny metal, and we have this one that is kind of a tarnished metal. So I created here a mask to essentially drive where this tarnished metal is applied. So in the bottom here, I'm using a geochannel with an occlusion. So the occlusion and curvature that is used here is baked here through the bakery. So I baked out ambient occlusion and curvature, and I'm using this here. I'm inverting this one and crunching it. I'm applying a tallable procedure here to drive it. And then I'm using this from the shelf here. Now we have this smart mask. So I'm using one of the smart masks here called rough metal that I'm kind of adding on top here of everything. And this in turn is the base for my metallic properties here for this one. So we remove this one. We see the breakup is diminished like so. That's the base, and then I worked a bit on the integration of the rust. So we have this rust material on top that's completely covering, and I then integrated this further, also using a mask here, rusty edges, and the result of this mask looks like this. So essentially I'm just slightly applying some kind of rust effect here. This one is then added like this, so we have the paint on top. I also further tweaked here the dirt mask. So I also took one of the shelf masks here, the grime, and just added that here. So looking through the shader here, we get this result here. So let me see here, if I zoom in here, we can see that this is what I added. So all of this is going to be covered in the upcoming episodes. That's going to culminate in also acquiring HDRs and a backplate that we'll then gonna insert this asset into in the end. There's gonna be a lot of new tutorials coming out here in the near future, focusing on this one with the rocket engines coming next here on my YouTube channel.